The Rostow model, also known as the stages of economic growth or the takeoff model, is a historical model of economic development proposed by the American economic historian Walt Whitman Rostow in his 1960 book, The Stages of Economic Growth, a non-communist manifesto. It posits that all developing economies pass through a linear sequence of 5 distinct stages on their path to becoming developed, industrialized nations. The 5 stages and intuitive explanations. Think of a country as an airplane preparing for and completing a journey of economic modernization. Each stage represents a phase of this flight. 1. The traditional society. The grounded plane intuitive explanation. Imagine an old, propeller-driven plane sitting on a grassy field. It hasn't even started its engines yet. Characteristics. This stage is characterized by a pre-Newtonian understanding of science and technology, limiting productivity. The economy is dominated by subsistence agriculture, with most people engaged in farming. Social structure is often hierarchical and rigid, with limited social mobility. There is little centralized political power, and values are generally fatalistic. Economic activity, primarily agricultural, with limited surplus production and minimal trade, often through barter. Barriers to growth. Lack of modern technology, limited capital accumulation, traditional social structures, and a focus on maintaining the status quo. 2. The preconditions for takeoff. Preparing for flight intuitive explanation. The mechanics are starting to work on the plane. Some initial investments are being made in infrastructure, and people are beginning to realize that things could be different. Characteristics. This stage marks a period of significant transition. External influences or internal forces begin to disrupt the traditional society. There's a gradual shift towards commercial agriculture and the emergence of extractive industries. Investment in infrastructure, transport, communication, power starts to increase. Education begins to expand, and a more entrepreneurial class emerges. National unity and a more centralized political structure start to develop. Economic activity. Diversification of the economy beyond agriculture begins. Trade expands, and savings and investments start to rise, though still low. Drivers of change. Increased exposure to the outside world, the rise of a new elite interested in economic progress, and government initiatives to promote change. 3. The takeoff. The engines roar intuitive explanation. The plane's engines are now roaring, and it's rapidly accelerating down the runway. This is a period of intense economic transformation. Characteristics. This is a crucial stage of rapid economic growth. A few leading sectors, e.g. textiles, resource extraction, experience a surge in investment and technological innovation, leading to high growth rates. Profits are reinvested, and a modern manufacturing sector begins to develop. Social and political institutions adapt to support economic expansion. Urbanization increases as people migrate from rural areas to industrial centers. Economic activity. Manufacturing takes off, and the economy becomes more dynamic. Investment rates rise significantly to over 10% of national income. Technological advancements become more widespread. Key requirements. A significant increase in the rate of investment, the emergence of dynamic entrepreneurial groups, and a supportive political and social environment. 4. The drive to maturity. Gaining altitude and speed intuitive explanation. The plane has taken off and is now climbing steadily, gaining altitude and speed. The economy is diversifying and becoming more sophisticated. Characteristics. This is a period of sustained economic growth and diversification. The initial leading sectors mature, and new industries emerge. The economy becomes less reliant on imports and develops a wider range of domestic production. Technological innovation continues and diffuses across more sectors. The society makes increasing investments in social infrastructure, education, healthcare. Economic activity. The economy diversifies beyond the initial takeoff industries. Manufacturing expands, and the service sector begins to grow. Investment remains high, 10 to 20% of national income. The country increasingly engages in international trade and becomes more integrated into the global economy. 5. The age of high mass consumption. Cruising at maximum comfort. Intuitive explanation. The plane has reached its cruising altitude and passengers are enjoying the comforts and amenities. The focus shifts from basic production to mass consumption of durable goods and services. Characteristics. This is the stage of a mature, industrialized economy. The focus shifts from basic needs and heavy industry towards the mass consumption of consumer durables, cars, appliances, etc., and services. A significant portion of the workforce moves into the service sector. The society may choose to invest in welfare programs and address issues of income distribution and social equity. Economic activity. High levels of consumption are prevalent. The service sector dominates. There might be a focus on quality of life, environmental sustainability, and social welfare. Intuitive takeaways. Linear progression. The model suggests a relatively straightforward, linear path that all countries will eventually follow to become developed. Investment as the key. Capital investment is seen as a crucial driver of progress, particularly during the takeoff stage. Sectoral shifts. Development involves a significant shift in economic activity from agriculture to manufacturing and then to services. Internal transformation. The model emphasizes internal factors within a country as the primary drivers of development. Criticisms and limitations. Despite its intuitive appeal and historical influence, the Rostow model has faced significant criticism. Oversimplification. It's argued that the model oversimplifies the complex and diverse processes of economic development, ignoring historical, cultural, and geographical differences between countries. Deterministic nature. The model implies a fixed path that all countries must follow, which doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of diverse development trajectories. Some countries might skip stages or follow different paths altogether. Eurocentric bias. The model is largely based on the historical experience of Western industrialized nations and may not be directly applicable to developing countries with different historical contexts and global positions. Neglect of external factors. The model primarily focuses on internal factors and underemphasizes the role of external influences such as colonialism, global trade imbalances, and dependence on other nations. Lack of explanation for transition. The model describes the stages but doesn't fully explain the mechanisms or policies required to move from one stage to the next. The takeoff stage in particular is often vaguely defined. Assumption of homogeneity. It assumes that countries within each stage are relatively homogeneous, which is often not the case. The age of high mass consumption as the ultimate goal. Critics question whether high mass consumption is the only or most desirable end goal of development, especially considering environmental concerns and alternative development philosophies. Conclusion. The Rostow model provides a simple and historically inspired framework for understanding economic development as a linear progression through distinct stages. Its intuitive airplane journey analogy makes it easy to grasp the basic idea of a transition from a traditional to a modern economy driven by investment and sectoral shifts. However, its limitations in terms of oversimplification, deterministic nature, and neglect of external factors mean that it is now largely considered an oversimplified and somewhat outdated model in development economics. Nevertheless, it remains an important historical reference point and a useful starting point for understanding early development theories.